You're tuned in to Bring It Home with Craig Fuller and JP Hempstead, where we talk about American reindustrialization and what is driving the industrial economy. Had a really interesting conversation at F3, FreightWaves Future of Freight Festival, held in Chattanooga, Tennessee on November 20th, talking to the head of sales for Nikola and commercialization at Nikola about what they're actually up to.
Yeah, it was a great conversation with Ryan Clayton. Talked a lot about the company's history, what they're doing now, the regulatory environment that's changing a lot of shippers' calculuses about what kind of transportation they need. Really cool conversation. We had it live on stage, so hope you enjoy it.
And Nikola is a great company that highlights innovation. It's also a sort of infamous company because of some of the controversy around its founder, who has actually been convicted of securities fraud, but really highlights hydrogen and electric and the movement that's taking place, and just really a part of the innovative part of the economy. And I think it's interesting to look at Nikola. We also did one on Boom Aero, which is about supersonic airplanes. And so much of the industrialization, people think about these old smokestack industries, and they sort of picture that when we talk industrialization. But what is so powerful about what's happening in the industrial economy is newer industries that are very uniquely American. We look at China. China is their model has been so successful, in many ways brute force and sort of planning to really create a lot of mass manufacturing and just create a lot of product. What China's not good at, JP, is really being innovative. What they're good at is ripping off other countries and copying and doing it more efficiently. They're not very good at innovative, and that is taking place in the United States through so many different companies that are actually bringing manufacturing to the U.S. and innovating around it. And I think Nikola highlights that. It's a company that went public way too early in its life and has paid the price, but it shouldn't discount what it is doing in terms of new technology and development.
They're delivering trucks, they're dialed into their customers, they know their use case and their markets. It's cool to see them start to mature a little bit.
So much going on in the sort of EV space, big conversation. Nikola is not the most famous company, maybe the most infamous company in the space. Between Convoy and Nikola, this is a stage of lots of sort of conversation. What's the latest?
On a very positive note, we're delivering trucks. We can see from a market standpoint that we've become a lot more of a well-oiled machine, a lot more strategic, a lot more direct, understanding who our end user is. Our order board is full with fuel cell, battery electric. We're coming back. We almost, by the end of this quarter, have every single customer returned battery electric truck post-recall, and we look forward to a really good 2025 with battery electric as being part of our portfolio.
So Ryan, I think one of the biggest challenges of the Nikola story is you guys are still a young company that really didn't have any business going public when it did, but we've moved forward to that. What is the current status of the Nikola business? Where are things at?
So when you look at Nikola as a whole, and I'm proud, I'll start with this. Being a pioneer, there's a lot of bloody noses. I myself came from a traditional ICE industry, in this for 20 years. Even myself coming to Nikola, it took me going to see the plant and seeing the production and seeing how it's made to realize that Nikola, this isn't the end story. This isn't where Nikola stops. We had a rocky start, right? Everyone wants to talk about it. Our past is the past, and where we've gone now, and I'll say this, every company goes through that stage of a maverick and getting that to market. Unfortunately, that didn't work out so well. So the last 4 years, we've completely redefined, recreated, just become focused on and listening to the North American market. You can see most recently, we're really focused on dealerships. You see a lot of startups that say, well, we're going to go direct. In theory, sitting around a boardroom, yeah, that makes sense, but the reality is this is a traditional industry. Customers want to know that if their truck breaks down, despite what the OEM says, they're being taken care of. So our dealerships are a part of our success story in all of this of where we're going today, most recently Canada.
Yeah, you were at Volvo, been at Penske, you've been a part of the whole sort of traditional OEM internal combustion story. The Nikola story, I think what most people would recognize the technology is the hydrogen, the H2 technology, which is, I think, potentially a game-changing technology. What is the status of hydrogen as it relates to Nikola's sort of view on it?
It's interesting. So we're focused on what the customers and what the market is telling us, right? We have the benefit of seeing it from two angles. We see the benefit of where battery electric truck fits and where the benefit of where hydrogen fuel cell fits. Right now today, 85%, I would say in that range is hydrogen fuel cell focus, because it's take away the battery electric truck in itself, it's an infrastructure problem, both on battery electric and hydrogen. And you can ask some of our first adopters that have experienced some of those bloody noses along the way too, of learning of high availability and fuel times and things along those ends. But now that we've kind of redefined, we're going to have 9 stations by the end of this year up the California corridor. That doesn't include a station in Canada as well. Partner stations. I think we're going through what the customer's asking for. And again, when you look at it from a traditional side of, okay, if I have to do this, because contrary to popular belief, nobody likes mandates, nobody likes the government pushing anything down your throat. But as North America becomes more of a global ecosystem, we're managing of, okay, is it CNG, is it LNG, is it propane, is it battery electric, is it biodiesel? And when you do the TCO for each of those, you come to the conclusion a lot of the time of, okay, 500 miles of range versus 250 to 350 miles of range. 20-minute fill versus 90-minute battery charge. How long are my permits going to take to get everything up and going? So there's pros and cons to each, and really the customers are kind of speaking for the deliveries you're seeing today.
Ryan, one of the things that I was really interested in learning more about Nikola is that sort of when battery electric trucks and hydrogen fuel cell trucks first came on the market, I kind of presumed that they would be most readily adopted by shippers that had private fleets, and they had maybe fixed routes and returning their assets to the same location every night. But you guys have also seen a lot of uptake with for-hire fleets. I noticed a Keenan Advantage was called out in your last earnings release. Can you talk a little bit about how those for-hire fleets are kind of weaving Nikola trucks into their operations?
Absolutely. So, and that's one thing going into what Nikola's done to define who our approach is. And I always start out by saying, you're not going to get a 10-truck, 18-speed, diesel-loving W900 converted to anything, right? I mean, look at glider kits and right? Those still exist today, and that's part of an American fabric. But the big companies that we're seeing, like the CAG, you say, so that would probably be one of the last fleets anyone would see would be an oil fuel hauler buying.
Kind of ironic.
Right? It's ironic.
Exactly.
But when you have Nestle Purina, their end user, Fortune 500, saying, we demand this. We want to go green. We want to be associated with green. And Keenan is their supplier. Guess what? Hey, Nikola, what do you have? Let's talk about this. And you tell that story by each one of the announcements we've made with those end users that we're doing. That's a consistent story. And again, sitting down and going through the TCO, you realize, okay, if I'm going to do this and I'm going to take a leap of faith forward, what's most comparable to what we're currently operating, what we're currently doing?
So the hydrogen story is really, and you've mentioned electric having an enormous amount of limitations. We've talked about it extensively. The charging network, the infrastructure, the time, all of that. But the hydrogen story also has significant limitations. You talked about having 9 stations in California.
Yep.
Is that enough to hydrogen the state?
No, absolutely
What's
not.
it going to take to get ubiquity?
I would say this, we always say internally, we kind of have a gaseous mob that the entire industry is breaking into. If you went to ACT Expo last year, you would have seen hydrogen, 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 right, as a big push. If you Google hydrogen, Nikola probably won't come up in the first search. You'll probably see Shell, you'll probably see Air Liquide, you'll see those companies, right? And then when you get on the Class 8 side, that's where we'd come up in that search. We decided to not be the blockbuster, right? The rest of the world was streaming. We needed partners. You have Plug Power, first green hydrogen in Georgia, green hydrogen in Albany, New York, Air Liquide. And again, partner after partner saying, and private equity companies and startups in Texas saying, hey, green is green. How do we get on this? So we have a lot of outside companies jumping into this where at first we had to build the cell phone and we had to build the network. It had to, right? Or else it wouldn't work. Now we can start to rely on other carriers to take care of that network and build out the ecosystem.
Are you starting to see hydrogen? How many hydrogen stations are forecasted in the next couple of years?
From a Nikola standpoint, and it's called the Hyla station. Hyla is Nikola, but we've on purpose rebranded Hyla because we want other OEMs, users using that where they don't feel like they're going to an OEM fueling station. From a number standpoint in the next 3 years, to keep up with the demand and the rate we're going, we need to be close to 50.
Wow.
And that's going to take a tremendous push, not just from Nikola or Hyla. It's going to take an ecosystem coming together, which we're seeing. There's a station in Oakland right now, FEF, state-of-the-art facility, that's taking a lot of the burden off of our fueling stations as well. And you're getting customers outside of California, like most recently DHL, Diageo. They're saying, okay, there's no stations in Illinois, but there's incentives. How can we do a behind the fence solution and bring it there? So I think you're going to see a lot more of that in the next 5, 6, 7 years.
You think Donald Trump has been very public about his sort of war on government environmental regulation, taking a big shot at the electrification, some of Biden's policies, the Inflation Reduction Act and such. What do you think that means for a business like your own in a sort of a new administration?
You did warn me we were going to talk politics backstage.
I think unfortunately or fortunately, you're in an industry that is sort of target, as anyone in this room, supply chains are on the front lines.
So without getting political, but being political, I'll say it to you this way. So if you look at some of President Trump's state mandates that he's been proud of, and some controversial state things that he's been proud of, that it's not a federal decision. This is a state decision, right? I go back to...
You're not CARB specifically.
It's not, when we're talking CARB though, CARB was there, but CARB wanted to give the stimulus. There's 17 CARB adopted states that I don't see going away because this is a state-by-state decision. On top of that, 3 weeks ago, AAPA conference for all the port authorities, they just announced a massive $3 billion going into ports. And what we're doing, we have a dedicated team. The ports don't buy trucks. The end users of the ports buy trucks. So we're kind of defining, okay, who's calling on those end users going to the ports when there's $300 million available. For one part of our business is the vouchers incentive side, which you have to be an early adopter. The other part is, okay, how do we make this work and where's the money? And every OEM has a team. We have a very good team that goes after those and makes sure that we're putting the state money, port money to the end user. And we have to be very smart about that.
When do you think we see, you mentioned TCO being an important element in driving, total cost of ownership driving the economics of hydrogen or battery electric. When do we see sort of your view where hydrogen is an attractive investment in of itself? Is this a decade out before the economics become favorable enough for outside of all the regulatory and customer demand, is it when it truly looks at sort of the ubiquity of economics?
Yeah, I think to fairly answer that question, there's a lot of startups, there's a lot of private equity companies that are currently creating hydrogen today. The cost it takes to produce hydrogen is cheap, right? It's cheap. The cost to distribute hydrogen, to dispense hydrogen, to man the stations, that's where you see that cost go up. No fleet's going to pay $26 per kilogram compared to what they're paying at diesel. But we're also, because of our offtake agreements that we've worked on for the past 5 years, before we even had a hydrogen fuel cell truck on the road, we were able to negotiate a much better rate, so that way we can be close to a TCO parative with all economics when we're sitting down and saying, okay, yes, the cost of the kilogram is more. If you're paying X amount at diesel, because we all know here, any fleet sitting, if it advertised $5 at the pump, they're not paying $5 at the pump, right? So, but it's taking all the other factors in of that truck, and it taking all the other factors in that, okay, what is truly the cost to operate this truck? And that's where it becomes favorable.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask you just about more use cases. We talked about some of the larger global companies that have carbon neutral mandates and want sort of their vendors to be able to accommodate that. You mentioned port authorities that are trying to reduce emissions, in these sort of urban areas. Where else is Nikolas seeing a really good niche for the trucks that it produces?
I'd say, are you just specifically talking on hydrogen fuel cell, or are you talking on battery electric as well?
I think it's both.
So right now we've looked at Canada, because when I'm talking North America as a whole, Canada from an incentive standpoint is very big on incentives. When you get into, but taking away where business is, or easy to do business, when you go into the actual application of that end user, when you get into a battery electric truck, it's a different experience, right? That driver, so whether you're in a high populated city or whether you're sitting at a port, you're not dealing with what you typically have to deal with when you are operating a diesel truck. When you go to a dealership, the dealership is not the typical experience that you have on the battery electric side or the hydrogen fuel cell side, because the truck is smart, it's different. We see our use cases really going more into city, government, a lot of, again, ports is going to be huge. I think ports is going to be a big business for everybody. Drayage, and it doesn't matter where you fall politically. When you're sitting, whether it be, I live in Georgia, when you're looking at the port of Savannah and you see all those trucks just lined up and sitting, or to go to LA, you have to ask yourself, from the congestion standpoint, from everything else to fatigue, it's, okay, what can we do to make this better? And that's where we see this really, and that's where it has been really taking off.
You mentioned, one of the things that I hear, a lot of folks talk about the lack of infrastructure. Charging or fueling infrastructure is obviously one, but the other piece of it, and you touched on this early on, is the maintenance network. This is a new technology. There is a shortage of diesel mechanics that come in and out of the industry. Certainly there's at times more demand for diesel maintenance than there is folks around the country. What is your view on sort of how are you guys helping fleets deal with hydrogen maintenance that is an entirely different kind of power frame?
No, and that's a good question. So when you look at how a fuel cell is maintained, or a battery electric truck, how that's maintained, you have, when you break it down to what is produced, we have over 60% of our truck, both on battery electric and hydrogen fuel side, that is North American sourced. Our plant is North America. We are proud to be, and we're staying in North America, in Coolidge, Arizona. But when you take that one step further and you look at the components which running the machine, it's not a Nikola fuel cell. Bosch makes our fuel cell. It's a German engineered high quality product. The batteries are run from Proterra. So What we can offer that's different than any other OEM is our software integration, making the driver easy to use, just how the experience is when the truck were to go down. We have what's called Train the Trainer. It's a white glove service. Yes, we have our dealer bodies that we're training, and every single day they're getting better and better and better. But we also have a dedicated support team, call it Geek Squad, so to speak, to make sure that, hey, if there's something the dealership can't do or touch, it's done remotely. But you don't touch the Bosch fuel cell. You don't open it. Just like someone would say, don't open the cell of a battery electric truck. So the componentry is different. You're still going to grease the fifth wheel. You're still going to change the tires. You're still going to do the general maintenance. But what you're looking at and maintaining is different. You're looking at coolant levels. You're looking at greasing the same components you want on a normal truck. But the PM cycles are different than they would be on a diesel.
And if a truck has a problem with the powertrain, the engine, if you will, shuts down, how does that get worked on? Is there a roadside assistance that can haul it to a...
Just like any, it would either get towed. Majority from both sides. From one, I always say our greatest disadvantage at Nikola is that we're not a 100-year-old OEM. But our greatest advantage at Nikola is that we're not a 100-year-old OEM. We pivot quick, we move quick. This is all we do. Zero emissions is everything that we do every single day. There's not a 9 to 5. So it's a completely different approach on how that truck is serviced and taken care of versus sitting and waiting and again, engineers pointing fingers in silos. We don't really have that siloed effect. We got a truck down, go take care of it. Call our pulse center, which is called Uptime, 24/7. We're there, and as we grow, we're going to do the same thing in each key geographic location across North America with supporting our dealerships.
So, Ryan, I definitely wanted to ask you about manufacturing in North America. You guys have a truck plant in Coolidge and also a battery plant in Arizona as well? So,
not a battery plant. So our batteries come from Proterra today.
Proterra, okay.
Right? Everyone saw that last year. We've moved forward.
I see.
But our trucks are manufactured and built in Coolidge, Arizona.
Yeah. So can you tell us about that assembly plant and sort of what the throughput will eventually look like for that facility?
So you can kind of see as we're ramping up market-wise, we have every single year, it's growing. You look quarter by quarter, our fuel cell production is growing. Yes, we had a hit on our recall, and truly it was, just to talk about it, to be honest, we had to make the decision because it's not really the pack, it's what's inside the pack. We had to make the conscious decision that we wanted to make sure we didn't interfere with any integrity of our battery electric truck, right? So that was probably our biggest hurdle. We were running Proterra in our fuel cell, which was a fantastic battery, and that's when we said, okay, let's integrate it to our battery electric. We moved forward. Now battery electric's coming back, where battery electric's going to be big for us next year. We're not out of the game. A lot of people ask, well, isn't Nikola just fuel cell? No, we're going to get back to the game. Big marketing campaign, big splash. That plant was built, to really answer your question, that plant was built to produce 30,000 trucks per year. And that's what we intend to do. That's what we want to grow to. It's not going to jump to that next year. It's going to be gradual year by year. And a lot of the adoption when it comes to state by state, as we inch closer to 2027, as we inch closer to 2030, as we inch closer to 2050, it doesn't seem like it's close, but it is close. Just like you were probably talking 10 years ago about automated transmissions and married powertrain systems, right? And look at where we're at today. So we anticipate our growth to eventually be that someday, and this isn't the end. This is just the beginning for us.
Is there a story about Arizona itself, why you picked Arizona for your manufacturing?
I think that goes back down to, right, first years with Nikola. There was always the where do we stay, where do we go, but Arizona's our home. They've been, between our plant, between headquarters, just from an incentive standpoint, we want to integrate in the community, which we've done. and we plan on staying in Arizona. That's never going to go away. I think I can't really answer the question on why, at least on stage, but I can tell you that we're there to stay, and we've made it our family.
You talk about 30,000 vehicles at production. What does that look like from a supply chain standpoint? Are the components built in the U.S. or are they a lot of imports that make up those components?
Like I went down one of my first comments of, especially dealing with government contracts, our battery electric and fuel cell, we do everything. We have an entire team committed to finding North American source products, period. 60% of that is North American built, manufactured, produced, that we use in our trucks today. We're proud of that. We want that to be more, but we can't yet. It's a global issue with batteries. It's a global issue with, again, we're on the fuel cell side with parts, you name it, where we still have to rely on global partners, but we never want to shift and pivot away. In fact, we're not happy that we want to be 80%, but it's really hard to do that being battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Tariffs are obviously a big conversation. The question then becomes, okay, if we have tariffs, what does that mean from a supply chain standpoint for an auto manufacturer, auto-related manufacturer?
Increases.
Increase in cost. Are your components, any of those made in China? Are you having to source things and look alternatives to China?
We are looking at all alternatives. I can say that. We're looking at all alternatives to make sure that we're not just looking at the next 3 months. We're looking at the next 3 years of what we're putting in place for this to be successful, for this to grow. It's not easy. I will say that. It's not easy because, again, a lot of your suppliers you're dealing with are overseas, but we're being very cognitive of who our suppliers are. We've made decisions that cost more, but in the long run will benefit our end user better because of where that product's being sourced from. I mean, if we're being held to the standard of being that sustainable, zero emissions green company, we need to live that too. We need to breathe what we live.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting over the next couple of years, just what happens with manufacturing shoring in the automotive space, because these supply chains are global. So a lot of pressure on companies like yourself, but across the whole auto supply chain to source through the U.S., but also internationally.
Yeah, it's been a big change for a lot of manufacturers today. But again, I think we're at a point right now in our early growth, and I hate to say early growth, but it is. This has really been our test year, and it works. So as we continue to grow, we have the benefit of being a little bit more picky-choosy. I don't know if I can say the same things. I want to say the same things a decade from now, but we have a luxury that some OEMs don't have today.
Yeah, in some ways, the lack of, or the smaller run sizes gives you advantages because you don't have the issues of high production volume that cause issues.
Yeah.
What is, when folks are looking at you guys, you talked about hydrogen being 80% of the use cases, or the primary use case. What is it that the buyers are really judging? Is it truly total cost of ownership as part of it? Is there a thesis that they come in why they want to work with Nikola perhaps versus other OEMs?
I think it's interesting. You get through the door a lot because either when you go to a front door, you go to an office building, or you go meet with the CEO, president, they either want to hear what's going on with Nikola, or they want to hear if Nikola's going to be around. They want to, what is the state of Nikola? It's no different than I support local business. I like the story of local business and big chain, right? It comes down to there's an incentive to work with somebody that does this full time. Nikola's made decisions that are healthy. The stock doesn't look, on the outside, it might not look healthy, but they're healthy decisions internally as we grow and as we become more successful. We have to weed some of that out. So I would say the biggest thing as part of our sales process is the demo process. When you get, we call it butts and seats. You get a driver in that seat, feeling the experience, the turning radius, that everything is there. And again, most OEMs can't control the suppliers but what they can control is uptime and what the driver's looking at. And one thing that we do really good is our software and our integration and our breakdowns. I mean, the truck is gonna break down. Every truck breaks down, but it's how it's handled. That's where drivers like, okay, this is easy. There's no keys, it's key codes. So you have transportation managers that can now track, why are you only getting 260 miles of range and John is getting 320 miles of range, and you can track that down to a science that's available for that manager. This industry's changing. So I think from that experience, just from the overall driver experience, once you get in it, you love it. Going back to me going to Nikola, it took me going to the plant and seeing it and feeling it and driving it to realize, okay, there's a story here.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan, I would contend, and I've said this a few minutes ago, is that the issue with Nikola was that you went public too early. Like, as a founder of a startup that goes through lots of phases and those growth cycles, that blitzscaling, the chaos that is running a small business, you guys were public before you actually had made it through those sort of adolescent stages. It's unfortunate because the truck itself is really cool and you're pushing the envelope on new technology. It's unfortunate some of that baggage has been carried forward.
Yeah.
But I think if you can get through this, I mean, one of the things I always tell people, the hero's journey, as someone in media, we always love to, as a general sort of sense, is you love to build people up, and then this is the classic American story. You take them down and then you want to see them rise from the ashes. I think a lot of people are actually rooting for you guys to come out of what has been a difficult chapter, because I think it gives hope to a lot of other people and businesses that have also struggled in the stages of life.
Yeah.
What can we look forward to from Nikola in 2025? What kinds of conversations are you having with prospects? The big order book?
I would say this without going, because we haven't publicly said any number, but when you see Nikola announce wholesale, right? No one, it's like wholesale. What is that? No dealership purchases wholesale without having a retail end user. So I think you're going to see a lot of big names. I think you're going to see some changes at Nikolas, a couple more well-defined changes that make Nikola that much sharper. And our goal is not this industry. I repeat it every single time. North America is becoming more of a global ecosystem where our European counterparts are demanding transport companies to do this. So this isn't something we want to put down anybody's throat of, you need to go green, this is great. But for the first adopters, for the people that say, hey, I don't want to wait until the end, let's sit down and talk through this, let's do a demo. Once you do that, it makes it easier to adopt to this technology and be a part of the future. We're not the only ones. We're just the pioneers doing this. You have a lot of OEMs that are on our tail skirts that are fighting very hard to take measure in this space and to be proactive of where the future is going. So I would say the next 2 years are going to be big for Nikola, and we're just getting started. This is not, we've been through some things, but this is the best it's ever been. This is the clearest we've ever seen vision-wise, just understanding what the market is and who our end users are. So, looking forward to it.
And you think there's enough momentum among the states, regulatory agencies, to kind of withstand any Trumpian backlash to green stuff? Like you think it's pretty baked in at this point, like that sort of landscape to generate the incentives and the demand that people need to make that leap.
I mean,
that's what when you look at Elon and.
I mean, does it matter at the end of the day? Because if the thesis, and ask Ryan this, does it matter if the thesis is that shippers, the customers of the trucking companies, are demanding it? Maybe they're a European company demanding, or an American company that feels like it has a social responsibility. Does it matter if the regulatory backdrop is there to support it?
It does and it doesn't. In certain states it does, right? Certain states are there. No one's, again, when you're TC, transportation's a pennies game, right? Nobody's going to spend an extra $200,000 to say, I did this. There are some that will do it. But majority is transportation's a pennies game. Transportation's been in a rut for the last 12 months. I'm really hoping for some tailwinds going into next year. but no, I mean, the carb, I go back to President Trump when we were with different OEM, he hated that the tail wagged the dog, and that's carb that is a state decision, and we see more states actually putting their heels in by pushing against it than the opposite. So no, I
mean, shippers going to demand. I mean, it sounds like
Yeah.
the best applications, Ryan, are actually in local. You mentioned drayage. You mentioned that where dedicated stuff where you have a set route or you're within a geographical radius of a point. Is that where the best applications for hydrogen and electric are?
I would say from a hydrogen standpoint, again, if you get 500 miles of range and you can start in the port of LA and go all the way up to Sacramento and back and then beyond, right? When we go into Washington. That, from a hydrogen standpoint, yes. Battery electric will get there, and there's a lot of transportation just changing. There's a lot of trucking as a service companies that are basically taking that pressure off of you having to buy a battery electric trucks and doing it for you and filling in those holes. So yeah, I do see it going that route. It's just going to be across North America. I think it's roads and infrastructure, state to state. I think it's, you look at the diesel standards today, I don't see that going away for a very long time.
And hydrogen supply, the supply of the actual gas is available and ubiquitous?
Readily available.
And so
most common element of the universe.
Most common,
except it's in the
You've
sauce,
got
right?
two, without going down you've got different colors of the rainbow in hydrogen, but you got green hydrogen and gray hydrogen. Some companies demand green, majority of companies are fine with gray because it meets all emissions, but wind, solar, and water. So yeah, no, I don't see that. Again, if you do your research, hydrogen has really helped, because when you're looking at something comparable, 20-minute fill, 500 miles of range versus 90-minute charge and 200 miles of range.
As someone who bought an electric car and was told it would get 300 miles on a charge, and I'm lucky to get from here to the Atlanta airport and back.
That's a skill
I can
issue.
attest to
That's
the
a skill
range.
issue.
What's that?
So that's a skill issue.
That's a skill issue and probably a driving 90 miles per hour.
But battery electric is getting better. OEMs were getting better with range and stations. Battery electric's not going to go away.
But what I love about hydrogen is if we can get to ubiquity of the stations, is the range issue is a non-factor, and like you said, this
long range. And
water is the byproduct of a fuel cell,
byproduct.
which I think is such a cool story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Ryan, really appreciate your time. Amazing story. I do sincerely hope that you guys continue to innovate and deliver, and it's an interesting inflection point, and we hope to have you back to tell the rest of the version of the story as you guys continue to scale.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.